Hello everyone and welcome to the new Python video. Today we're going to learn how to use IP address module in Python. And more specifically, we're going to see how we can manipulate IPv4 networks and IPv4 addresses, how we can, for example, check if an IP address belongs to a network, or how we can expand subnets into individual IP addresses and things like that. So without further ado, let's cut straight to the chase. I'm here in my Spider IDE, and the very first thing that I'm going to do is to read in a file with IPv4 network ranges that I'd prepared in advance. So I'm going to pull up my terminal, and just to show you that I have this ranges CSV file, so I'm going to navigate to Python scripts, and in here I have something called ranges CSV, and it contains few IPv4 network ranges, and we're gonna work with that in this video. So to import this or to read this to a Python object, I'm going to use pandas library, and pandas is a very powerful data analysis tool. So to use it, we need to import it first. And if you don't have it installed, just go out there, look up for some tutorials on how to install it. There is plenty of this material out there. So we're going to import this using import pandas as PD. And let's make sure that we are in the correct directory, and that this is not correct. So I'm going to switch it here to Python scripts, and now we're ready to go. So to import this to a Python object, to a pandas object, we're going to use a read CSV method from pandas library, and we're going to save it to a data frame object, and the F stands for data frame. It's a common convention to use this. And data frames, if you're not familiar with that, are basically two-dimensional data structures, and series are one-dimensional data structures. But we'll get to that in a bit. So we're going to say pandas read CSV, and I'm going to pass the name of our file, read CSV. In addition to that, we're going to add one more argument, and this is called names. We're going to specify the name of the header for our CSV file, for the column, basically, for the column name. So this is gonna be, let's call it ranges. There we go. And you can see that here in the variable explorer, we have this new object, data frame type object, and I'm going to print this out right now. And we can see that all of the ranges are here, but there seems to be a small issue in the first row, and that is this white trailing space at the end of this network. So we're going to fix this first, and then we're going to take one of these networks, and we're going to see what attributes and methods are available to us using IP address module. Okay, so to fix this issue, we can access this data frame. We can access this series using this bracket notation, and now we are able to access only this series. Since our data frame has only one series, we don't have many options here. But the thing that we're going to do is to basically use the string str class and strip method to strip this trailing white space here in the first row. So I'm going to say df ranges, and we're using this assignment here. Basically, we're going to override the original series using this assignment. So I'm going to use the str class, and from this str class, we're going to use the strip method. And if we don't pass any parameters here, arguments, basically it will remove leading and trailing white spaces from our strings. So let's execute this, and if I rerun this, we can see that this has been fixed. All right, so now that we have it, let's copy one of these networks. Let's take the first one, and we're gonna play around with it using the IP address module. So the very first thing that we need to do is to import IP address, and this is a built-in library, meaning that it is in the standard library, Python library, So we don't have to install it, just import it. And now we can create our IPv4 network object. Okay, so to do that, we're going to use from IPAddress module, we're going to use this convenience function called IP_network, and we're going to pass in here our network range. And you can see that we get back this IPv4 network object. So I'm going to assign it to a variable. I'm going to call it net, and you'll see it up here in the variable explorer as well. So we can see that the type is IPv4 network. And now the easiest way to check what methods we can access on this object or what attributes are available is to pass in this variable to build in the IR function. And we're going to take a look at few of them. You can play around with all of them if you like, but that's not really the point. So we're going to take a look, for example, at different representations of our subnet. So we can say net that with host mask. We can take a look what it looks like with net mask and things like that. We can check the length or the number of IP addresses that are contained in our network range. So that would be this num addresses attribute. So there we go. What else? There is this very useful host method and I want to point your attention to that because we'll use it in a bit. So when we access this, when we call this method on our object, let's take a look here. We get back this generator object. So I have a video on generators if you're not familiar with them, so I will put a link to the description. But basically, generator in this context allow us to iterate over this object and get each individual IP address that is contained within this network. So let's see how we can get that. Okay, so I'm going to use list comprehension here, and again I have a video on that if you're not familiar with them. So the same story here, I will put a link to that. So what we can do here is basically say IP for IP. So we're using this expression here, then we are specifying the implied for loop header, and at the end we're specifying our iterator. So IP for IP in net.host. So since this method returns an iterator, we can use it like this in this context. So let's close the square brackets, and let's execute this. So we can see that we get back all these IP addresses, but we have this representation with IPv4 address object, so maybe we want to get rid of that. It's as easy as passing this IP expression, IP object to str built-in function, and we should get only IP addresses. Alright, so now that we have it, let's assign it to a variable. We're going to call it IPs. There you go. Alright, so we get back to our ranges here. So let's say that we want to expand each one of these networks in our series into individual IP addresses like this. So we can write a function that will achieve that. Here on the left side, I'm going to switch to this script file, and we're going to call it explode or expand. Let's call it explode. It has a better ring. Explode. Let's call it nets. And the argument, we're going to specify one argument here, and the same story here. First, we need to create a IPv4 network object from our IP address module. So before we continue, let's import our IP address module. And in here, we're going to say net equals IP address module. We take IP network function, and we're passing our network here. And we'll use it in a bit as a Lambda function on our series here, in our data frame object. Okay, so now that we have it, we can basically use the return statement, and in the body of our return statement, we're going to construct this list comprehension. So actually, we can copy this and save us a bit of typing. So we should be ready to go here. I'm going to compile this, and we're going to apply it now on each network in our series. So what we can do here is access this series, ranges series, using bracket notation, and we have this convenient apply method to which we can pass a function object. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And in here, we're going to use the Lambda expression. So we're defining one argument in our Lambda expression, and this argument will refer to each range, to each network, subnet in our data set. Okay, so now we're going to specify here our function, explode nets, and we're going to pass here this one argument, and we should be ready to go, although we probably will get an error. Let's see. That's correct, and that is this value exception here, value error exception, because some of these networks ranges, and you might encounter into these situations as well, has host bits set. So what we can do here is there is another parameter to mask out this host bits, and that is called strict. So we can set it to false. By default, it's set to true. And now I'm going to compile it once again, and we're going to rerun our expression here, our function. Okay, so now we can see that we get back all these IP addresses, but they are squeezed into basically into rows. So each row contains a list of IP addresses. So before we move on, let's modify our original data frame. So I'm going to use this assignment here. And now we're going to take a look at how we can explode these IP addresses, because maybe you want to have one huge column of IP addresses. So we're going to say df.explode. We're going to use this convenient method, and in here we're just going to specify our the column, the name of the column. So this is gonna be, let's see, column equals, and the name is ranges, obviously, and there we go. So as you can see, the index values are replicated, but we have our IPs exploded into unique rows, so we get more than 200,000 IPs. Okay, so I'm going to change our original data frame. There we go. Okay, so we've taken a look at how we can create an IPv4 network object, but we really didn't go through IP address objects. Okay, so let's take a look at that as well. So I'm going to take this first IP address, and we're going to assign it to a variable called IP. And the same story here, we're going to use the IP address module, and from this module we're going to take IP address function, and we're going to pass our IP address. There we go. So we can see here in the variable explorer that we have our IPv4 address object. So we can execute it here as well. We can print it out here. So the same story, we're going to pass it to the IR function, and we're going to see what attributes and methods are available to us. Okay, so we can see, for example, the binary version of our IP address. We can check if this IP address is a private or public IP address. So we can use this is private attribute, and others. We can see the exploded version of that, and I encourage you generally to go through this to see if you find something interesting for you. Okay, so now that we have it, let's see how we can apply this on our new data frame object. So actually, we can call this apply method on our series as well. So we're going to use the Lambda expression as well. So let's say that you want to get, or you want to retrieve, the binary representation for each IP address. So what you can do here is just say, first of all, since these are all strings at this point, we need to create IPv4 IP address objects out of them. So we're going to say IP address dot IP address, and we're going to pass this X argument in here. Okay, so let's execute this and see what we get. Okay, nothing has changed, but actually these are not strings anymore. So if we assign this, if we change our original data frame, we'll see in a bit that we can apply or we can access these all attributes that we saw here in on our IP addresses objects. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Ranges, apply, and we're going to use Lambda. And let's say we want to see the binary version. There we go. So we could easily overwrite this as well if we wanted, and things like that. Okay, so one more thing that I want to show you is a very convenient, so to speak, membership test. So let's say that you want to check whether an IP address it belongs to a certain network. That's what I've mentioned at the beginning of the video. So we have this IP and network IP address object here. So and we have as well this network object here. So what we can do simply is say IP in net, and it will return a Boolean value. All right, so let's say that we want to check. This is going to be a very artificial example because maybe you'll have more networks to check against, but let's say that we want to check whether each one of these IP addresses in our data frame, in our series, belongs to this network object. Okay, so let's print this out. We have this network object, and we're going to check if each one of them belongs to this network object. Okay, so what we can do here is, again, df ranges that apply, and again, we're going to use Lambda expression because we want to fetch, so to speak, each of our IP addresses. So when we define our argument, it will refer to each item in our series. So now, as I said, we can simply say X in net, and this should work. So you can see that we get back these true values and false values respectively, but it worked fine. So for example, we can simply create a new column with the result, like in the following way. So we can say df results, and this should work as well. So we can see that we get back our results, so we can play around with this as well. And essentially, that's all that I wanted to show you in this video. If you have any comments or questions, let me know, as always. And if you've liked this video, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button. Once again, I want to thank you for your time and wish you a good day. Take care.